Betsy and Thomas here for the American Intelligence Media. Thomas, this is a huge, big story that's breaking now, the deciphering of the Zodiac Killer Code. We broke the first part of this series yesterday. Folks, if you look at the description box below, in a link are all the articles and videos that refer to even that. But I had a friend call today and said, well, I don't get it. What's the big deal? I mean, it's great that, the killer is found after all these years. And I said, oh, you haven't heard part two. And this is when Thomas will come in and show you how the Zodiac Killer episode is really tied into a much bigger picture.
Well, Betsy, it certainly is exciting working for aimfortruth.org and being an anonymous patriot in the conclave, because your friends and now our friends come to us and ask us to do very strange things sometimes. And sometimes, well, let us say, often it doesn't vet and it doesn't work out. And so there are many things that we have been dabbling in that have been presented to us that we could go into, some of which we've talked about. But what is happening now is a most amazing thing, something that we certainly had not anticipated, nor were we in any way prepared for, something which was rather shocking. So we're going to tell you our version of the story, our side of the story. As you know, we just did an interview with Professor Thomas Horan, and he is just amazing genius focused on this Zodiac Killer and the Zodiac Killer hoax. And he has 3 books out already at Amazon, I think over the last 7 years. And he's been researching this for much longer than that. And he's been, strangely enough, in contact with some of our friends through our associations with Cicada 3301. And I guess some of those contacts, as well as other friends of ours, are the ones who contacted Thomas, the person who we interviewed, and told him some things that added up in his picture and put pieces together in the puzzle. And then he's really the genius that figured it out, but he's being given help. And so we, through Truth News Headlines, aimfortruth.org, have posted one of the old military cryptology books from World War II, right after World War II, that is very similar to the type of cryptograms that were being used with the Zodiac Killers, cryptograms that were being printed in newspapers in San Francisco and just north of San Francisco. So we didn't get involved in this until just out of the blue. We get a call saying, oh, they have decrypted, for us here at Aim for Truth, they have decrypted the 340 Zodiac Killer code cryptogram. And we're like, oh, well, that's amazing, because that's, been a question for, almost 50 years now. What did that mean? What were they putting into that code? And how did that relate to these killings, the Zodiac Killer killings that were supposedly done by this person who posted these cryptograms and wrote the letters to the San Francisco Gazette and another San Francisco newspaper, and one just north of there, the Bay Area. And what was going on, I guess, is that people had attempted to break this code for all these years. And the first code was supposedly simple to break. There were 4 of them. And the second code has never been broken until this time. So we thought that was, pretty shocking. And then we thought it was also shocking that we got a chance to hear the whole backstory of this from the deepest researchers of the Zodiac Killer and the Zodiac Killer phenomena. And so now we have been in contact and receiving now a stream of information of researchers who've been doing this for a long time. Now, you must imagine that the newspapers, the police stations, the law enforcement, and the DA's office, and the people who were all around these occurrences over these many years, because the cases are still open in Napa, in, I think, Mendocino, in Vallejo, Vallejo, however you pronounce that, Vallejo.
I know, folks, he's from the Ozarks. Not everything can be pronounced the way you like it, but feel free to add comments below. Now, Thomas, I hate to tell you this, but you feel like you're dragging to me, okay?
No,
I feel this low energy.
Story.
We only have high dragon energy on this channel, so pump it up a bit for me.
Okay, so what happened is these great cryptologists behind Cicada 3301 intervened in a long unsolved mystery and used their genius to help. And then, as I was speaking to Thomas Horan, he painted this picture for me, and then I basically told him my conclusion, and he goes, "Well, I don't speculate like that." And I said, "Well, I do."
Well, it's the
and
case.
So I'm going to speculate about what it's really about.
Yes, because we see this a lot. We find researchers, and you may be one out there listening to us, who have a particular subject and you know really well, and you've researched it back and forth. You're in that silo, and we love it. You bring it out, you show it to us, and this is a huge find. But as we were listening to the story unfold, we realized it was a piece of a much greater picture that we've been trying to explain to our audience for a long time. So that's why this is part 2, because of how this now fits into the bigger picture.
Yes, that's exactly right. Thank you, Betsy.
Yeah, what she said, right?
It's what she said. So I'm giving this out of my own opinion. The conclave has been given these cryptograms and asked to work on them. And we are trying to help as much as we can. And others are being called in to help. You know, we've sent out the word last night through the interview. Please, if you can help, if you can bring evidence, anything that's evidence, because Thomas is an evidence guy. He's an investigator, and he actually works with all of these people in Northern California, because he's been working on this for so long. He knows them, and he knows them by name, and he's been in every one of these police departments. So what we're trying to do here is just bring justice to the situation, not in some way claim that there was some genius being expressed here, though it was the genius of these cryptologists who brought this case now, which has been a continuous open case. It was closed for a while. So what was a cold case has now become a very hot case. And unfortunately, we've already seen reactions from, let us say, the very forces we're going to describe in this.
Well, let's just say an hour after uploading a video, action was taken. I'm not going to describe the action, but we saw that things are moving now. So if you have evidence and you want to bring it forward to your circle of influence, this would be a great time to do it.
Yes, and we thank all those who have brought it. So what was really going on there? Well, it seems as if through the research, Professor Thomas's research, he had discovered whose handwriting it was that wrote at least 4 of the letters, the first 4 zodiac, or I can't say first 4, but 4 of the zodiac letters. And he is the one who basically pinpointed who it was that had the ability and the placement in a certain police office that was able to cover the crimes of not only himself, but others. And the decoding of this cryptogram is an obvious message to the people who were part of a cabal or syndicates or groups, whatever you want to call them, but they seemed to be perhaps as many as 3 different groups that needed to be coordinated. And they needed to be coordinated because they were running drugs, human trafficking, heroin, and they were being paid off with gold. Now, that is what is indicated in the translation of the second cryptogram. And it also names who the person was that was coordinating that.
Which is in the description box below, folks.
Yes, Ken Snook, who was basically the expert in the area as a cryptologist and also for drug analysis for any type of DEA action. Also, he seemed to have been a clearinghouse for some ex-soldiers who had worked alongside of the people who later became the Office of Strategic Services, and then later that became the CIA. And so these people that Hal or Ken Snook, Harold Kenneth Snook, so they call him Ken Snook. So Hal was his normal name. So, but in the letter, he signs it as basically Zodiac Kin Snook, or Zodiac Snook, and puts his name Kin Snook in it. So it seems as if Kin Snook, in his time after World War II, was involved with the person we call Wild Bill Donovan, the person who essentially created the OSS, the first CIA. And he was a wild man, and he just did, they like to use the word skullduggery with him, because he was basically the incarnation of espionage, subterfuge, disinformation, using newspapers for yellow journalism and disinformation codes, writing codes, breaking codes, and particularly he worked with Alan Dulles, who then became the first head of the CIA, but he worked specifically with Edwin Pauley, a person hardly anyone knows about. But Edwin Pauley and was essentially a copy of the man who wrote the Dawes Act after World War I, who controlled, during the war, all the flow of all the resources, whether it be gold, silver, metals, oil, munitions, you name it. It all was ran by one person in World War I. And afterwards, he created just disasters with his policies. But Edwin Pauley did that after World War II, and hardly anyone knows about him. But he was the one who had to make the decisions about what are you going to do with all the gold that was the Germans stole from France, who had one of the largest gold holdings at the time, at the beginning of World War II. And all of the other European nations and all the other nations that the Germans conquered, they stole their gold, turned it into a bullion that they stamped a Black Eagle on. And this Black Eagle gold is well known. It was kept, it was actually Dawes who created the Bank for International Settlements after World War I that held this gold, some of this gold from World War I, and then later after World War II, the Bank for International Settlement held a lot of this gold. It was the Bronfman family who sued this bank and other Swiss banks to get back the gold that was taken from the Jews. It was also the place that a huge amount of gold that came from the Japanese, that they had stolen from China, at least 8,000 tons of gold was stolen from China, and from all the other places in the Far East, was then gotten together by General Yamashita, and he hid it in the Philippines in caves and dug holes in the ground, and he hid it there during the war as basically their insurance package. And then it is that gold, the Black Eagle gold and the Yamashita gold, that Wild Bill Donovan came into control of after he found out that it was hidden in the Philippines, and he took a number of soldiers, Hal Snook included, as well as others that Hal Snook worked with in California, into the Philippines, and they were part of finding this gold. But they worked with Filipino guerrillas, and they used a language to create a secret code called the Oskaya language and other local dialects. And it is those dialects that confused everyone for so long that made it almost impossible to decrypt the cryptogram used by the Zodiac Killer.
Thomas, you said so much there, and I just, for example, you mentioned the Bronfman family, and of course they're in the news lately because of this child trafficking ring, and that is definitely a path you could go down and to describe in more detail, as well as many of the things that you're doing right now. But what we're doing right here is we're giving you an overview, and we would welcome anyone in the comment boxes to take apart any of the names that Thomas is mentioning and provide further enlightenment and education to our readers. So that's just why I wanted to interrupt, because we can't go down all these many paths, but they're all related.
Yes, and in our intelligence reports on human trafficking and the way that the Bush family manipulated gold after he was in the White House, you will find Bronfman and their history described quite thoroughly in the scams that they were involved in. Because these are the very same people, yes, who now were involved in human trafficking with the Nexian group, as well as what is being accused of John Podesta.
Again, I don't want to go into all those details.
And Nancy Pelosi.
Yeah, and we're going to get there.
So if you start looking into those, you'll find that these are the very same things that were being hidden by the obfuscation of the Zodiac killer, who probably only killed in a confirmed investigation as 6 to 8 people perhaps, but 37 were claimed. But those others were killed in cover-ups for murders that happened, for ritual killings that happened, for drug informants who had to be knocked off, for Hell's Angels who were working with these Northern California police to bring the drugs down from Oregon and to be paid off in gold and to take human trafficking all the way back up into Canada. Because there's a huge amount of human trafficking that then gets focused in British Columbia if you look closely into the research. And it's inexplicable to understand this without knowing that these type of rat lines of the CIA, rogue CIA, and people like Hal Snook, who may or may not have been CIA, rogue CIA, but they were trained alongside them so that people go out and become their own rogue agents. So it seems as if there was just a tremendous amount of killing, murder, extortion, trafficking of all sorts going on that was being covered up by this cabal that used a weaponization of the media as a form to communicate to all the people involved, which included people in foreign countries. And that's the reason it had to make it to as high a top page in these San Francisco newspapers as could be, because these were the instructions on how these rat lines were flowing and who the contacts were.
Yes, as we discussed yesterday, back in those days, they didn't have an internet platform that you could come into. Anyone in the world, for example, drops into the American intelligence media, where we leave our intelligence right there in the open source. But back in the 60s and 70s, you wouldn't have that. So you had to find a way to put your secret codes in a place where anywhere in the world could find them. And so as we began to look and listen to Thomas H's story, we began to see, because we have a larger vision from the work that we do here, is that, oh my, this is how they were putting their codes out. There was, I believe, one murder where the newspaper didn't put the code out, and the Zodiac killer was supposedly killed another one so that that story could get to the front page, correct?
And wrote a letter saying, if you do not put the cryptogram...
Yes.
I will kill 12 people in the next weekend.
Yes, because it was the cryptogram that they wanted on the page. In fact, there were times where the letter didn't appear, but the cryptogram did. Is that correct?
Yes, most of the letters did not appear. And they seem, according to Professor Thomas, to be part of a network of news agents and writers who were in on this and who were part of basically obscuring crimes. But let's remember, folks, that goes on to this very day. Jerry Brown is a criminal. Sanctuary states are illegal. He should go to jail. Everyone that he told that they must have sanctuary cities, and everyone who enforced it, broke the law and are basically part of a conspiracy to commit murder, because these illegal aliens they let out, whether it be Obama's illegal catch and release, whether it be sanctuary cities, sanctuary states, or the insanity of what's going on there now. Let's just look at what's going on there now.
And then let's get back. I know I distracted just a bit, but we are going to get back to it. I want to talk about the bigger picture of what this was all about, how that relates to the Marco Gold, the trafficking, the heroin, the motorcycle gangs, and all of that.
California wants to split into Northern California, where these rat lines of criminality have been going on for so long that they're protected by the very criminals who stand behind them, and politicians like Nancy Pelosi, who get her share, being one of the richest of the people on Capitol Hill, or a Maxine Waters, who's down there in Hollywood, who wants to separate into their separate district, one of their own states, the state of Hollywood, which is, I would call it the state of debauchery, if you ask me, where they do nothing but promote death and sex, and then yell and scream that they don't want guns and they don't want rape. And then you have Southern California, which already belongs pretty much to those who have come across the border illegally. So it's okay, they can split it up because there are different rat lines and different cabals because California is so big. And so when you look at the Northern California section, you are actually looking at this moment one of the most corrupt people in the Senate Dianne Feinstein. She left the Senate Intelligence Committee because of her corruption there to go to the Judiciary Committee to protect her own actions while she was in the Senate Intelligence Committee. Almost every intelligence staffer with the top secret security clearance has now been shown to be compromised, illegal, part of institutionalized leaking, the go-between between Loretta Lynch and the Hillary campaign, or the person who arranged Christopher Steele's meetings with that intelligence committee, Mark Warner's, basically his step and fetch it boys, Daniel Jones. We've gone all of this. The point is that Dianne Feinstein couldn't be any more corrupt. Nancy Pelosi couldn't be any more corrupt. And look at what still goes on in Northern California to this day. And what was going on in those days was lawlessness. So much lawlessness that they allowed this, what would you call it, this serial killer scam to become a weaponized form of the media, which was used in foreign countries as espionage, subterfuge, and basically mind-bending. These are CIA control methods of yellow journalism, propagandizing the enemy. And that's what was going on with the Zodiac Killer. Why did they need this? Well, think of what was going on at the time. Charles Manson gang, and no one put them in jail? Just people missing all the time?
Hitchhikers right off the road, daughters missing, and the Napa police or whoever's the investigators there wouldn't do anything?
A horrible seeming child ritual deaths. Yes, as you just pointed out, the hitchhikers. And think of all the hitchhikers who went to California and haven't been seen since. Also, think of how many people came up missing after the fires in Napa Valley. It was a shocking statistic. There's no way. It's utterly impossible.
Let's get back to...
I'm talking about today's crimes right now. Jerry Brown basically runs a criminal rogue state, and it's broken into cabals. And the Hollywood cabal is, of course, the megaphone of the globalists. And the Northern California still does, to this day, what it does. It was the home of all illegal activity in America. If you wanted to skip the draft, if you wanted to grow dope, if you wanted to do whatever you wanted to do, free sex, free love, free drugs. And it was completely commissioned by the police, by the courts, and by the criminal mainstream media. So I highly suggest that all of you keep a very close eye on Professor Thomas Horan, because his next book is going to reveal all of this and more, because we have revealed to you the text as it is decoded so far with the help of himself and others. And we even had our little part in it too, but that was just to add a little piece to the puzzle. To be quite frank with you, this is what happened with myself. I first looked at it. This first time I ever remember seeing this cryptogram. We didn't study this in cryptology school, but we did study that manual, or one very similar to it, updated version of the manual, as we were learning cryptology before we went onto the machines. But then we went into the machines, did the code. But in my day, it was also, you could memorize it. If you were very fast and had a very good memory, you could memorize the key. And so that book is showing you how to find the keys. And that book was used to help decode this cryptogram. And it was only recently declassified from top secret and put out into public domain. And it was gotten through a FOIA request.
Okay, so what does this code, now that it's unbroken, what does it tell you?
It says that what is called the Marcos gold, or the Filipino gold, or the Yamashita gold, that it was dug up, and that the people involved in this have knowledge of that, because nobody pays anybody
all
off
of it
in gold.
Or part of it, or do you know the
this
quantity?
is a very small part.
Okay.
No.
Well, I just have to make sure the qualifier's there, because it sounded like it was all.
No, that gold has been used in so many fake transactions to create Blackstone, to create asset management groups, to create fake assets and valuations for banks.
Right.
That gold
I don't
has
need
been
to go down
leased.
that weed patch, but
I can tell you where it is and where the majority of it is, but it's used now and then to literally pay off criminals, because the problem is when you have that much gold, you can't bring it into the market, or you just devalued what you have. And the amount of gold that they have is huge.
Plus, that raises a lot of questions. So they need a way to launder that gold.
And they couldn't admit they stole it from our enemies, that we should give it back.
Right.
Well, no, they're not going to give it back.
So
this is what they've been using as a way to, they launder it and use it for their black ops from the beginning. And this was approved by Alan Dulles, the head of the CIA. It was approved by Edwin Pauley. It was approved by Wild Bill Donovan. It was approved by everybody, but all it had to have was a nod from the president. And this gold has been used in ways that we have described many times in some of our articles. And recently, the Chinese made a joke of this and said that they had gained 8,000 tons of gold. They're missing 8,000 tons of gold. They say they created on their Shanghai gold market. Not possible. And when they tried to add it to their national treasury, everyone called them out on it. But they had named that amazing, mystical 8,000 tons of gold that just magically appeared out of nowhere, the Yamashita gold. Everyone knows this. There have been lawsuits against the United States government from Imelda Marcos over not only the fact that America kept going there and looking because it was buried in caves and in holes, and they were dug in holes all over the Philippines. So when in these letters of Hal Snook and the original letters of what we could call at least the person who coordinated, if not was one of the Zodiac killers, he was talking about his experience in the Philippines, and the code that he used came from there. And his killing in World War II is by no accident that he's involved with killing here. And the gold that they were paying, it literally says, come to the lake to get the gold. In other words, he's saying, are you stupid? Look, I'm your coordinator.
Are we sure they got all the gold out of Napa Valley Lake?
Well,
or whatever lake they're referring to?
Nobody knows. There has been no reference to this gold before until now. And now that the code has been broken, it can be applied to the first cryptogram to see if it actually may reveal other things, because many words were dropped. Some words were not understood in some of the previous, in the one code that people believe they broke. But there could be further hints throughout the other cryptograms and encodings, and a further evaluation of the first one. Now, it says gold, and it's basically, here's basically, I'm not going to give it to you word for word, though that's already been revealed. Here's the deal. They're basically saying, I told you that in the news that I told the news, and everyone had this in the news, that I'm going to reveal who I am in the next cryptogram. I'm going to sign it. Now, why would he tell the whole world that, the person who's doing these cryptograms, or they? One reason and one reason alone. Obviously, they don't get who's coordinating this, and he's saying, I'm coordinating this, you bimbos. Maybe the Hells Angels were just too drunk or too high on drugs, and they just couldn't get it through, but some of them were probably right along with him in the Philippines looking and finding this gold. And they know he has the gold, and they know he's good for the gold. The Hells Angels were taking the opium, taking the heroin, and running it from Oregon, where it was being refined by the CIA. This is well known historically. And it was being ran down through Northern California into San Francisco, and then from there to the rest of California. But it's where, they were doing that, and then they would run human trafficking, the gold, the laundered money, and all the rest of their crimes back north. And this was institutionalized.
Well, no wonder they want the borders open down there, because they still need that human trafficking.
Remember also, it's important to remember that the southern border is not closed, and the CIA is not active there, which it should be. The only thing the CIA should be doing right now is going against the only country that we are in war with at this moment, and that is Mexico, the southern border. That's why we're in a national emergency, because of human trafficking, drug trafficking, the very things that CIA has, since its existence, used as a way to bring their drugs, like right now from Afghanistan, into America, and basically continue the flow of their black ops money, because they're very, very greedy. And they slowly bring this gold out, but now it's being used on such a huge level of manipulation. And it's in Zurich. It's at the Zurich airport in the gold reserve.
So you're kind of like all over the place, I think, for listeners, and I just want to encapsulate this. What we're talking about is that the Zodiac Killer phenomenon was used as a way to launder gold and drugs in the United States. Is that correct?
And human trafficking.
And human trafficking. Okay. Fast forward today, we don't have a Zodiac Killer out there. However, we still have these operations going on. That's what you're saying.
And the same people, organizations still run them.
And the same organizations, and we have their names, and these are the very people like Nancy Pelosi and John Podesta that years ago everybody is reporting on. You know, even with the Pizzagate stories, you saw that Nancy Pelosi even owns her own Goat Hill pizza parlors up there. You know, all this crazy stuff. But now we're beginning to see a larger picture that's been happening, like another whole operation is going on in the United States that most regular people out here were not aware of.
It is a fact that human trafficking is observed, it's watched, and it's not stopped. It's even known that the hub of human trafficking in the East goes out of Atlanta. And sometimes humans leave in airplanes, unmarked airplanes, in cages out of Atlanta, Georgia. But in America, on the West Coast, they go north and they go into British Columbia because there's so much criminality going on in British Columbia because it can hide it so well, and because the Queen, it's a Commonwealth nation, and they simply don't care. In my opinion, and don't get me started on that, but it is America that is providing this because it's the same old rat lines. There's nothing new. Money flows deeply. When we say Pelosi and others have reported on it, has anyone reported that he was basically the mob boss mayor of Baltimore, Maryland?
No, her father was.
Pelosi's father was. Mm-hmm. Okay, does anyone want to talk about that? No one's going to talk about that. They want to talk about his crookedness. They want to talk about what he has been accused of. No one's going to talk about that.
Her daddy was a mob boss, and so was Hillary's daddy.
Hillary's dad in Chicago was second in charge after Al Capone was killed. He then became an alderman who then basically brought the mob directly into Chicago politics. And then, as we know, both Barack Obama and Michelle Obama worked underneath Loretta.
I shouldn't have said anything.
Valerie Jarrett, who was the assistant chief of staff of Mayor Daley. They are Chicago mob. It's very clear. Now, what are the mob? Everyone knows who's allowed to do what crimes. Obama was allowed to do human trafficking during his 8 years. Now, Trump is not allowed to separate children from their human traffickers without being accused. Isn't that amazing the way that works? The criminals do so well at manipulating the news that people believe whatever the news says. You know, in my day, if it was on the news, it was true, is what people thought.
Well, it's never been true. Now, tell me about Pelosi and Podesta and how that relates to the Zodiac Killer.
Well, we can only speculate, but because they are, one of them is a politician, we can say what we want, just like Maxine Waters is saying what she wants. We can say what we want about her, but John Podesta is, well, we cannot really reveal at this moment until we do more research exactly how John Podesta is tied into the very rat lines that we're describing, but we do know that he is. Now, the point is, I'm not going to get into that because he is not an elected politician. And so I have to be very careful about what I'm saying because these are current crimes.
Yes.
These are very current crimes. And you look at what's going on in Napa Valley right now. You look what's going on in Chicago. You look at the fact that Dianne Feinstein tried to make the entire city of Chicago ran by the Senior Executive Services, which means a federal agency, which is a militant paramilitary organization, was going to take over Chicago, and Pelosi was going to allow it. No,
she wasn't going to do it with Chicago. It was San Francisco.
Did I say Chicago?
Yes.
San Francisco.
So that's why Betsy's here, people. I got to keep
that's why
honest.
You have to be here.
Okay.
It's basically, that's like the mob of D.C., the SES, and they were getting ready to take over San Francisco, her district. Matter of fact, we've already printed all that in our intelligence reports with the help of Americans for Innovation and Michael McKibben and those genius amazing investigators, they have revealed all of these things. And so what we're talking about is an institutionalized form of basically payoffs to people who are paid off the minute they take their job. SES running San Francisco. Now, if you don't know that San Francisco and what is going on in San Francisco, that'll be another tape, but another video. But the point is, the second you get to Napa, you are just on the northern edge of the bay, and then all the way on up through Oregon, up through Napa Valley. Just look at the people who have been come up missing. Look at the crimes. Look at the unsolved crimes. You will find a corridor leading all the way to British Columbia of unsolved crimes that no one is looking at. Why? Well,
and we can't very well send the FBI in there because we know the FBI can't find crime even under their own roof. So who's going to go in there and help get this fixed?
And as we see, it's a sanctuary state. They love criminals. They take murderers and release them onto the street to go murder again, to create chaos so that when their crimes get caught, just like with the Zodiac killers, I have an opinion that there were multiple killers and that there were many people involved. And unfortunately, because of the research going on now, some of their families are still around, and it's going to come out who the Zodiac killer was covering for, because the Zodiac killer has now named himself. And since he named himself, then all of the theories that are involved in the Zodiac hoax, the books of Professor Thomas Horan that we're talking about, who revealed these things, his suspicions were true. And he did his by investigative research, and now the cryptology being solved just absolutely is the finishing pieces to the puzzle that have the very names on them. As a matter of fact, when I first looked at it, I looked at it for a long time, the cryptogram, the 340. I've never looked at it before. One thing I then told members of Cicada were the following things, and this is also, they use these. So, sorry, D, but you're wrong. This old cryptologist still has some oomph left in him. I said the following looking at it. Oh, whoa. There's 3 or 4 languages being used here, and I can't help you on 3 of them or 4 of them. There seems to be 4 signatures using what was an old Maltese Cross Templar signature code, which is, I'm a little surprised because the way that it's used, it has 4 names in it. From what I can surmise, this is what I told them before the research was done, that then turned around and went back to Thomas, and then Thomas turned around and brought it out, and then we were asked to talk to him, and then he shared with us, oh, well, this is this, and we said, oh, well, this is what we surmised. We surmised multiple languages, and because the syntax of the way things were presented, and that the code, the hash lines or the hash tree, which it is technically, had the code embedded in it, and that the signatures weren't part of that hash tree or hash line. You don't need the code for that. Those are signatures or names, and that basically I couldn't help them because the key is only talking about one part of it. Even if we solved one part of it, only one part of it would be in a language that would be related to the letters that we normally use in English. So that's what we surmised. And then what did Thomas tell us on the phone the other day, just yesterday in the interview? He didn't even tell me this before, that there was Japanese, English, Oskaya, another language that is a Filipino guerrilla language, the code from the books, the standard U.S. military cryptological hash trees, and English. And that when we saw it decoded, there were 4 names. So that's as close as we could get. And that's because and then didn't even try to break out what the encoded line, the line at the top, actually tells you is the code.
Well, for most people listening to that, everything you just said is gibberish, okay? So that's why y'all are cryptologists. So for the cryptologists out there, would everything you just say be interesting to them?
Yes, because we need their help to make sure that we want this verified. We want it verified by multiple ex-NSA cryptologists. Not myself. I'm old. Though I looked at those books and I helped create the machines that took those books and made them into machines, believe it or not, using unit record equipment, old Honeywell.
Oh, get out of those weeds, honey.
It was great. No, it was great. It was great. We used 5-digit ticker tapes. I was
Okay,
talking
what do we
about all of
do
this
going
stuff.
forward? What is next?
What's next?
Yes, what's next?
We have to decode the rest of it.
Okay.
We have to support these people who are doing the research and make sure that Northern California police do not go after them to try to make it look like, they were never really involved in this and are not involved now.
So that's why it's important that when you hear this audio and the others that we produce, you get it out to everybody you can, because in that way we give cover to each other.
Californians need to not re-elect Dianne Feinstein and Nancy Pelosi. Nancy Pelosi should be put out to her she doesn't have a winery. It's just a place where they have their secret meetings. But they got grapes there. But what do they do with them? Really. And we're supposed to believe that. So what she's really doing there, is she's worth $50 million. This is where the criminal cabals meet, at her winery. Just talk to the locals. They'll tell you. So Nancy needs to go, and the people in Northern California need to start really questioning the official reports of their police departments, of their courts, of their district attorneys, of who it is that's going after who, and when crimes are committed, do not stop. And so what we're saying right now is, we're giving a shout out to all the people who have now risen up because of what has just been revealed. And it's amazing what has come to light in just the last few days, last 48 hours, to be frank, 72 hours. Go after those criminals. Some of them are still doing the same crimes now. So, Betsy, we at the Conclave are going to be working to try to figure out this code, because we like codes. That's what we sharpen our teeth on. And I like these codes because they hopefully can bring to light some justice and can empower some people who want some answers about their family members, the 37 of them who were mercilessly killed. And there are others all around this that are not considered part of the Zodiac Killer's possible 37 victims. There are many others who have died, and we want those people to have justice. We want for their families to be able to let their beloved rest in peace.